Today is going to be more or less a summation of a lot of discussions we've had here, some on Sundays, mostly on Wednesday nights. We have spent almost close to 3 months now looking at possibilities for the future of the congregation, both for the facility needs, the fact that we've experienced some growth, and where do we want to be down the road? What do we want to leave for the next generation? And I keep stressing that the best course of action is to plan now rather than plan when a crisis hits, when a need arises. So this is all forward thinking. It's thinking that's being done deliberately and cautiously and with everyone's involvement. But it is thinking that's worthwhile. This is not just, well, let's dream, but rather what can we realistically do for the future of Unitarian Universalism here in Tullahoma. So we have had 5 Wednesday night meetings where we've gone into greater detail talking about different aspects. And what I'm going to do today is sum that up, but it's not just a summation. There's also some other thoughts that go along with this. But if you have come out on Wednesday nights, and many of you have, some of this will be a regurgitation, but it's going to be a summary, and I'm not going to bore you to death with stuff you've already heard, at least I hope not. Ultimately, there are 2 questions that we as a congregation must deal with, and we should deal with them now rather than when the need arises. The first one is, as a congregation, what form of leadership, what form of governance do we want to have here? Do we want to continue to try to have a minister? Would we rather go back to having a lay minister after I leave for whatever reason? And this is not impending Doug's about to leave, but rather, I could die in a car accident tomorrow. Grim, but it's a possibility. And what do you do then as a congregation? What do you desire as a congregation? Do you want that? Or do you want to go back to a lay-led type congregation where there is no one fulfilling the role of minister or lay minister? How do you want to operate? And secondly, do we want to stay in this building as it is? Do we want to modify this building? Do we want to go to a different building? Or do we want to build a new building? And those questions arise based on the growth. You look around, most of the seats are filled. Right now, as of today, we have 50 members, which is the most that we've had since I've been coming to this church. I don't know if it's the most we've ever had or not, but it's a good number, and it does show growth. And we have had pretty much consistently 40 or more people attending on Sundays, and we've even broke 50 once. And if that trend continues, and I acknowledge that that's a big if, then at some point soon, we're going to outgrow this building as it's configured now. And of course, most of you are famously aware of the bathroom problem, the line that forms, the people who leave early from the service to get out there before the line forms, the people standing in line having conversations with their legs crossed waiting for someone to get out of the bathroom. One bathroom sometimes is a bit of a problem. It's not a unsurpassable problem. It's not something that causes us to come to a halt in what we're trying to do here, but it is an issue. These sorts of problems, the number of people who can fit in here, the people who need to use the bathroom, all of these things are tied to the size of the congregation, and the congregation is getting bigger. Size of the congregation is also a critical factor as we try to figure out if we want to be able to call a minister in the future, a minister from outside the congregation, using the search process, and that's the phrase that's called search. As a Unitarian Universalist congregation officially enters the process to look for ministers who are seeking employment and trying to match them up. And it was called humorously in one of our discussions, it's like an online dating site. But that is exactly what it is. It's an online dating site. You put a huge package together for your congregation, and each potential minister puts together a huge package and creates a website for themselves, by the way. And then you go out and you secretly look at each other and see if this is what you might be looking for in a minister or in a congregation. And then there's a long process, which I'm not going to go into, on how you go and hear them at another spot, hear them speak, and then you can have them come here and speak for a couple Sundays. And it is a very detailed, very lengthy, and expensive process to call a minister. Now, we have done things both ways at this congregation. Don Mayle, whose picture's back there on the wall, if you don't know, is the first minister this church ever had. He served from 1973 to 1997, 24 years. After that, there was a gap from 1997 to 2008, where sometimes there was no minister, sometimes there was a part-time sort of minister who would come down, who was a student at Vanderbilt Divinity School, and they'd come down here a couple weeks a month and speak and provide some guidance, some counsel. And there were times where there was no one, and the congregation would just, work hard to find a speaker every week and hold together that way. And having discussed this as a group and got feedback from the people who have been here through all of this and talked about it, the general consensus of the groups on Wednesday night were, it would be really nice if we could have another minister, as opposed to going back to the other way, because that was harder. And again, that's the general consensus of the groups who talked on Wednesday night. It doesn't mean it's a unanimous decision, and it did not include people who did not come on Wednesday night, because we're going to continue to have these conversations and inputs from everybody. So don't think we're about to make a decision today. That is not the point. The point is, let's take a good look at what we as a congregation need. Now, those interim ministers who came down may or may not have performed some of the duties of a minister, like weddings or funerals, and I don't believe any of them really visited the sick, because most of them had school that they were going to and were busy on the weekdays. And they may have, I'm not absolutely certain, and we can talk about that during talkback, but for the most part, you did not have a ministerial presence here in the town whose life was tied up with the congregation. It was someone coming in from the outside and helping out, but that's a little different. Now, with this in mind, I spent one Wednesday going through the search process, how that all functions, so people could see what lay in store if you wanted to try to do that down the road. So the highlights, or the lowlights, if you wish, because it could be pretty grim, were the following. A full-time salary for a minister in this area of the country would range, depending on experience of the minister, from $40,000 a year to $61,000 a year, plus benefits, which include insurance, retirement contribution, the employer's share of Social Security, and professional expenses. Now, currently, we pay about a quarter of this salary to me. And it does not include any of the benefits except for the Social Security part that the employer would normally pay, but ministers actually have to pay it themselves. So we are right now reasonably able to support a quarter-time minister if one wanted to come here. But the search process really doesn't gear itself towards quarter-time ministers. You would have to expect to do at least a half-time minister if you're going to go into the search process, which means you would have to double the budget, essentially, from what it is right now. And I realize our current budget doesn't just cover my salary, but by the time you throw in all the benefits and other things, it would be close to double what our budget is right now to call a half-time minister. And the problem with calling a half-time minister is that half-time minister probably wants to be a full-time minister, and probably would be searching fairly soon to find another job where they can get a full-time paycheck, and that's reasonable and to be expected. Other things that come out of this are the UU Ministers Association has some other things that should be included in a package for a minister. 4 weeks of vacation a year, 4 weeks of planning and study leave, accrual of 1 month of paid sabbatical leave per year worked, but not to be awarded until after 3 years of employment. And that means after 3 years, a minister has accumulated 1 month per year. They can go off, and this is designed for self-improvement, spiritual seeking, things like that. It's not just a paid vacation. They're supposed to be doing something with this time. But they would be able to go off for, say, 3 years, or 3 months, because they worked 3 years, get paid for those 3 months, but they're not here. So it is 3 months paid absence. And during that time, you're going to have to fill in the gaps with the minister gone. So that's what sabbatical is. And finally, expectations are 1 Sunday off a month that the minister has no duties with the congregation, congregational service at all. So you get a guest speaker in, someone from the congregation speaks, someone leads the service, and that minister is free to go somewhere else and go to church somewhere else if they want, or whatever. 1 Sunday off a month. This is a full-time minister. These are the expectations that the UUA has for a full-time employed minister. That's a lot of time off, it's a lot of money, and by the time I had gone through the search process and expectations for a minister, people were a little bit overwhelmed and maybe just a little bit despondent in the group. It's like, how are we going to do that? We don't have that kind of money. One possibility we discussed would be going in with another UU congregation within a reasonable distance, and there are several that are small like us, and maybe doing a joint search process where each congregation takes on the salary of half of a full-time minister, and then you share a minister back and forth. Now this would involve having to have a very close relationship with another congregation, which we do not have, one that would be developed over time, and so it's not a quick fix, and that's assuming another congregation was financially able and interested in even doing such a thing. And this is pure speculation. No congregation has approached us about this, and I don't know that one would want to. But it was a thought that was thrown out there. Now our church has been here over 50 years, and we have never really seen anything close to explosive growth. We've seen peaks and valleys, if you will. So it's quite possible we've peaked and we're not going to get any bigger, and a lot of the planning for the future, at least as far as the size of the facility, may not really be an issue. There's no way to know for sure. But it is possible, one other possibility, by the way, for this minister problem is that someone from within the congregation might want to be the next lay minister or minister, might want to go to seminary. I mean, it's happened twice. Don Mayle did it and I did it. Somebody else might want to do it. And if that is the case, you know, we as a congregation might be able to help financially for someone going to seminary. Seminary is very expensive. Don't have any illusions about that. There are not a lot of scholarships out there for people going to a UU seminary, and so they will incur a great deal of debt and then come here and get paid a quarter-time salary. So it's almost going to have to be someone who either has a pension or has a spouse who has a really great job and is very understanding. But that is a possibility, and for us it may be the most realistic possibility. So all you youngsters, we may be starting to look around for one of you to go to seminary and take over the reins here pretty quick. And everyone who's under the age of 30 starts to squirm. So those are the things we came up with dealing with the minister and what we could reasonably expect down the road. I don't have answers for you. What I have is the things we discussed and the reality of what's coming at some point down the road. Now, we can hope that something falls in our laps and the minister problem or not is resolved with a minimum of effort. We can hope that, but it's not a great way to plan for the future. So what we must decide as a group is, do we want to go back at some point to being a congregation without a minister, looking for temporary part-timers from Vanderbilt as we have in the past? Or do we want to do something that might encourage the growth of our congregation so that we get larger, so that we could actually afford a minister? Now, growing to afford a minister is a bad reason to grow. I will say that right up front. Growth for growth's sake is a bad reason to want to grow. And there are costs to being a bigger congregation. So you have an intimacy with a small group like this where everyone knows everyone else, for the most part, and if you don't, you will, if you keep coming. You get to know people on a personal basis. And if you get larger and larger, you lose some of that. You lose the capability of having a discussion circle that's actually big enough that everyone can sit in the circle that wants to and partake of that discussion afterwards. So there are downsides to this. The upside to growth is, hopefully, the newcomers also give at the same rate the current members do, and you can reasonably go into search at some point for a minister. And this is the problem that all congregations face, and sadly talking about money is one of those things. And I'm going to come back to the money topic later, because I don't really like talking about money either. So this comes to the facility. If we hope to grow, if that is the desire of the congregation, and again I say if. Right now we can seat about 65 people in here reasonably. And as I said, one Sunday we hit 55. So we almost maxed out on a normal Sunday service. And if the growth rate continues as it has over the last 6 months, that could happen in a year, where people literally come in and there's not room for them. Don't know that that will happen, but it is a reasonable possibility. So what do we do about this? There are several things we've looked at. No decisions have been made. One possibility would be to knock out that back wall right there and extend the sanctuary or the meeting room, whatever you want to call this, further out that way. You could have more seats out that way and you could accommodate more people. Now the downside is you lose that room as a separate room, but the upside is more space. The other possibility is to add a bathroom, which is desperately needed here, and we could turn that back office room, which we really only use for our book sale at this point. We could turn that into a bathroom. We looked at maybe putting a bathroom up here in the corner and cutting through the cement foundation and laying a pipe through there, but that might be bad structurally for the building, and it might be better to have it back there where all the pipes are right now. Those are very realistic things we could do, and we might be able to get some money through the Chalice Lighter program, which is that program I've talked about where people pledge to give $10 when a call goes out. There's no guarantee that we'd be approved first, so we'd have to ask the question, and then we could get some of our money back from that. And the other money could be coming either through a special call or could come out of our new building fund. Another decision we will have to make. Conversely, if we want to move to a new building, that entails other problems, such as the cost of a new building. I've looked at two that were reasonable for us, for what we would want. Not that they were actually things we would want to buy, but a price range you're looking at for these two were both $300,000. Now, we don't have $300,000 sitting in our new building account. We don't have 10% of that. So that's pretty daunting when you think about it. And if you say, well, we could sell this building and that'll give us money, and a reasonable expectation would be somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000 for this building if you can sell it. And that's a big if too. You just don't know if you're ever going to be able to sell a building, and you can't plan on being able to sell it. So that's a problem too. So what we need to do now is look at those options, or look at maybe building a new building, buying some land somewhere, or deciding we're going to build a building that meets our needs uniquely. It'll be a green building, it'll be one that's friendly to the ecology, but building a building is also very expensive and very time consuming and requires someone who's going to oversee that. Someone from the congregation who wants to, or a group of people who want to actually oversee the planning, the contracting, going out and looking and approving each step of the way as something's built. A very lengthy process which would require serious commitment by some people. So these are the options. Or we could just stay the way we are. Line up outside the bathroom and hope we don't grow beyond 65. We could do that. We've done it for a long time. We might be able to do it for a long time more. And these questions are questions that have to be answered by all of us. It's not a selected group of people making this decision. Everyone's involved. Now, having said all this, we have decided, the board has decided to set up a committee to look into future facility. What do we want down the road? Modification, buy an existing one, build a new one. And because I was in the Air Force and we use acronyms all the time, I immediately said the FFC, the Future Facilities Committee. So we already have 2 people who have agreed to be on that committee, and this is the official call, the beginning of the process to set up that committee. If you want to be involved in planning, defining what we want in a building, as Chuck pointed out, you need to lay out square foot requirements, room requirements, bathroom requirements, parking requirements. Where do you want to be located? How far from right here would you be willing to go? All of these questions are going to be addressed by the committee. They're going to come up with suggestions, which in turn will be presented to the board, and then will be presented to the congregation. So it's going to be a very careful process. We're not rushing into anything. And the answers have not been predetermined. And I cannot stress that enough. Slow and deliberate to make sure we do it right with everyone's input. We're not rushing anything. And the answers have not been predetermined. They really haven't. We are looking to see what we need down the road. And at this point, it's essential to give everyone a little bit of a warning, because no matter what decision we make, someone, maybe someone's, will think it was the wrong decision. And it's easy to get disappointed if what you envision for the future isn't what the group envisions. I have seen churches split, or at least large numbers of people leave over some of the strangest things you can imagine. The color of carpet in the sanctuary, the type of Bible used in a sermon, the hymnal selection. It goes on, up to and including, I heard about one congregation that just had a horrible problem because they installed an elevator for the handicapped. And because of the cost and the look and the placement, it was a huge thorn in the sides of many people. Now, this building is a treasured building to many people. This has been home for us for almost the entire existence of this church. It did meet somewhere else for a couple of years, but we've been here a long, long time, and there are a lot of good memories, and there are personal touches everywhere you look. Most of these things have been constructed by hand. The artwork, the podium I'm standing at, the hourglass, everything. So much personal stuff here, and it's hard to leave that. And people have a deep emotional tie to that. So maybe we will stay here for that reason. But if we do decide we have to move on and go somewhere else, please don't take it personally if it's not the decision you wanted, or conversely, if you said this building is a dump. Especially if you don't have an emotional tie to it. It's ancient. It's got to be 100 years old, and there's one bathroom. Let's go somewhere modern with lots of room and good lighting and multiple stalls in each bathroom so I don't have to stand in line, and seating that accommodate 100 or 150, and let's plan for growth. And if you're all hyped up about that, and then we decide to stay here, don't be crushed and disappointed. Don't get angry. No, we're not going to have 100% agreement. What we want to have is 100% input. We want everyone who wants to be involved in this to be able to give voice to what they are looking for, what their vision is for the future. I cannot stress that enough. And I hope this will be a harmonious experience. And I just want to encourage everyone to think about that as we enter into this. Now, one of the tougher aspects of this discussion is this need for money. Religions throughout history have been notorious for being greedy, for taking a gospel of simplicity and turning it into an empire. Gilded, bejeweled, taking money from those who need it the most to build giant palaces and cathedrals and temples. It's gone on throughout human history. You see modern ministers at mega churches who have huge mansions and multiple cars, all in the name of whatever religion they purport to believe in. And the sheer audacity of people who ask for more and more and more from people who can't afford to give it up is truly nauseating. And so we don't want to fall into that trap here. I do not want to fall into that trap. I don't think anyone is not giving sufficiently. I don't think we need to sit here and ask for more. That's not why we're doing this. But I am trying to help everyone understand that money is a part of ministry. And it's the part that can be most easily corrupted. I had a professor at seminary, and I've shared this with some of you, who in a class on congregational hurdles, problems you're going to have in the congregation, actually made the statement that a minister needs to know the exact pledge amount of every person in the congregation. The minister should know this. And that doesn't make any sense. Why would the minister need to know that? So I talked to him a little bit afterwards, didn't get to have a long discussion about it. But essentially it was, you need to know who's given the most so you know how to minister to people. And now before we all go, oh, shock and appall, what a horrible, horrible person, think about it. Inherently I think it's wrong, but what he's trying to say is the people who give of themselves the most, a minister should know that. And giving isn't just the volunteer work which is visible, it's also the monetary work which is invisible. The pledges are secret, except to the few people who handle the money. And his logic was, a minister needs to know who's really giving deeply. It's not who's giving necessarily the most money, but who's giving the most out of what they can give. Whose heart is really in this. Now, I still don't buy that, and I don't know what you pledge. I've made it my point never to know. But what he's saying is, money is part of ministry, like it or not. And if you're in a big church, you are essentially functioning as a chief executive officer. You're going to have other people under you who are doing ministry also, and they're not called ministers. They might be called elders or deacons or something else. And they're going and visiting the sick and helping people out and doing social actions work and teaching RE classes and on, and they're not the minister. And you're overseeing it all, and you almost function more like an executive officer as opposed to how someone can function in a very small congregation where I actually do know all your names, and if you're sick, I do hear about it, and I do get to go see you. If you have 400 people in your congregation, realistically, you cannot do all that. Other people have to help. And so his point was, like it or not, you can have this pie in the sky view of things, but money is part of it. And if the money's not coming in, you're not getting paid. That sounds hard and callous, and maybe it is. I'm not going to judge anyone. My livelihood doesn't depend on whether or not we meet our budget. I have that freedom. Many ministers do not. They come out of seminary in debt up to their eyeballs, and they need their church to survive, and they need to get those paychecks, and even at that, they're not paying their loans off for 30 years. So I don't walk in those shoes. I'm just sharing this because these are the things we hear about at seminary you don't hear about on Sundays. So setting that aside now, and understanding that the bills do have to be paid, if we ever plan on bringing in a minister from the outside, those bills are going to get a lot bigger. Talking about money is important if you do it the right way. And I just hope that you believe, that each one of you truly believe, that we're not all about getting more cash and building up our little empire. That is not the goal of the board. That's not the goal of me. Preparing for a solid future, having a positive impact on our members and on the community. That is the goal. Being able to accommodate anyone who wants to come here is the goal. There's a rule of thumb in church planning processes. You hear this in seminary, and I confirmed it with my minister friends in one of our meetings. The rule of thumb is when a visitor walks into a church, they should see 20% of the chairs empty, because that means we have room for you. Psychologically, it means we have room for you. If you are packed to the gills and people are standing looking through the doorways, they walk in, they say, there's not room for me here, and they don't come back. Now, that's not an absolute rule, it's a rule of thumb. We don't want to get to the point where if somebody needs to be here, they can't feel comfortable here because we don't have room for them. That is why you allow for growth. It's about the needs of the people who want to come here. Not about building empire, not about being able to afford a minister down the road. It's about being here for the people who want to be here. So I hope that's how we can focus our energies over the next year as we plan for the future. Helping people to seek truth and meaning, to live aware of the interconnected web of all existence that we talk about, to learn to live a compassionate life. These are the goals. So 2015 may be a very eventful year for us. I hope we do manage to make real progress in figuring out how we're going to work in the future. In order to make this a good year, we need everyone to be involved. We need people who are going to be willing to serve on the board. We need new people who are willing to serve on the board. It can't always be the same people just switching seats. We need people to be involved. We absolutely need you to be involved, all of you. We need people who are willing to lead the service. We need people who are willing to speak. And so many of you have stepped up, but we're going to keep asking you to step up because that's how we survive. And we need you all to be there to help. This is how we have been able to be here for over 50 years and defy the odds. Because it matters to people. Because this group, what we stand for, has deep resonance with enough people that we've always survived. Through thick and thin, we're still here and we're doing well right now. I want to make sure we do well for the next generation. So, no fancy closing, no ta-da moments. We're going to talk about it in the discussion circle. I just want you to really, 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 really focus on what's your vision for the future and what can I do to help. Because we are going to be putting out the search for new board members. We're supposed to present that in March to the congregation. So that process is going to start. If you would like to help in one way or another, let me know. And with that, I wish you all to be blessed.